I woke up believing this would be the proudest day of my life, walking my daughter down the aisle just as I'd promised her mother before she died. But before sunrise, our family driver arrived early and did something I never expected. He opened the back door and pushed me inside, pulling a blanket over me. "What are you doing?" I whispered, furious. "Please," he said urgently. "Hide. There's something you need to see." Against every instinct, I stayed silent, and what I witnessed from that hidden place changed everything. Hello, everyone, and thank you for being here. Before the story continues, take a second to tell me where you're watching from in the comments. I truly enjoy seeing how far these stories travel and hearing from you directly. One important note: some elements in this story have been fictionalized for educational and storytelling purposes, and any resemblance to real people or settings is coincidental. That said, the message I'm sharing is meaningful, and I hope it speaks to you. I woke at 6:30 to sunlight streaming through the windows of my bedroom, the same bedroom I'd shared with Caroline for 30 years before she passed. 5 years gone now, and some mornings I still reached for her side of the bed out of habit. This morning was one of those mornings. "Big day, sweetheart." I whispered to the empty room like she could hear me. Maybe she could. I'd stopped trying to figure out what I believed about that kind of thing after the funeral. I stood at the closet staring at the navy suit I'd picked out 3 months ago. Mother of the bride dresses get all the attention, but nobody tells you how much a father agonizes over what to wear when he walks his daughter down the aisle. Caroline would have known exactly what to choose. She always did. My hands shook slightly as I buttoned my shirt. Not from age, I'm 62 and still steady enough, but from something else. Something I couldn't name. A weight in my chest that had been sitting there since I'd opened my eyes. Downstairs, the house was quiet. Too quiet for a wedding day. Emberlyn had stayed at her apartment last night with her bridesmaids, following some tradition about the groom not seeing the bride. I'd offered to let them use the house, God knows we have the space, but she'd insisted on keeping things simple. Simple, right. I made coffee dark and strong, the way I'd learned to like it during 30 years of early morning business meetings. The machine hissed and gurgled familiar sounds in the familiar kitchen. Everything was exactly as it should be. So why did I feel like I was standing on the edge of something? I carried my cup to the window overlooking the gardens. The May morning was perfect, not too hot, not too cold. The kind of weather you pray for when planning an outdoor wedding reception. The tent company had set up yesterday, white canvas gleaming against the green lawn. Everything was ready. Everything except me. I pulled out my phone, scrolled to a photo from 2 months ago. Emberlyn and Zachary at their engagement party. Her face lit up with joy I hadn't seen since before Caroline died. My daughter happy again. Wasn't that what I'd wanted? Wasn't that what Caroline would have wanted? Protect our girl, Caroline had whispered in the hospital near the end. Her hand in mine so light it barely felt real. Promise me, Pete, no matter what. I promise, I'd said, and I'd meant it. The sound of tires on gravel pulled me from the memory. I checked my watch, 6:55. Martin wasn't supposed to arrive until 7:30. We'd gone over the schedule a dozen times. He'd drive me to the church at 8, give me time to settle in before the ceremony started at 10. But there was his black sedan rolling up the drive 15 minutes early. I set down my coffee and headed for the door. Martin had been with our family for 20 years, since before Emberlyn was born. He'd driven Caroline to the hospital the night she had our daughter. He'd driven me to that same hospital the night Caroline didn't come home. If there was anyone in this world I trusted, besides my own flesh and blood, it was Martin Fuller. He was out of the car before I reached the front steps. The morning sun caught the silver at his temples, when had he gotten so gray, and I saw something in his face that stopped me cold. Fear. Not the nervous kind, the real kind. The kind that makes a man's jaw tight and his hands clench into fists. "Martin," I called. "Everything okay?" He crossed the distance between us in quick strides, glancing over his shoulder like he expected someone to be watching. When he reached me, he kept his voice low. Mr. Caldwell, I need you to trust me. Of course I trust you. What's going on? So, not here. His eyes darted to the windows, the driveway, the trees beyond. Get in the car. Please. Something in his tone made my stomach drop. Martin, you're scaring me. Gee, good, he said quietly. You should be scared, but not of me. Never of me. He'd driven my wife to the hospital when she was dying. He'd held my shoulder at the funeral when I couldn't stand on my own. This man had been a part of my family for 2 decades, and I'd never seen him look like this. What's this about? I asked. Is it Emberlyn? Is she hurt? Diam. She's not hurt. Not yet. Martin opened the back door of the sedan. But she's about to make the worst mistake of her life, and you're the only one who can stop her. Get in the car, Mr. Caldwell. We don't have much time. My mind raced through possibilities, each worse than the last. An accident, a threat, something wrong with the wedding. But Martin's eyes weren't frantic. They were determined. Whatever this was, he'd planned for it. I climbed into the back seat. The leather was cool. The car smelled faintly of the lavender air freshener Martin always kept hanging from the rearview mirror. Normal. Everything was normal, except for the fact that I was sitting in my wedding suit in the back of a car at 7 in the morning, with no idea why. Martin reached past me and grabbed a dark blanket from the seat. The same blanket he kept for winter emergencies. Lie down, he said. Cover yourself completely. You can't be seen. What, Martin, this is, Mr. Caldwell. He looked me dead in the eye. 20 years ago, I made a promise to Miss Caroline. I promised I'd look after you and Emberlyn no matter what. I've kept that promise every single day. I'm keeping it now. Please, lie down. Caroline's name hit me like a physical blow. Martin never invoked her name lightly. Never. I thought about my daughter somewhere across town in her wedding dress, about to marry a man named Zachary Palmer. A man I barely knew, if I was honest with myself. A man who'd swept into Emberlyn's life 18 months ago and made her smile again after years of grief. A man Martin apparently didn't trust. I lay down across the back seat, my suit jacket bunching awkwardly beneath me. Martin draped the blanket over me, heavy and dark, blocking out the morning light. Whatever you see, whatever you hear, Martin said quietly, don't make a sound. Not until I tell you it's safe. Understand? I understand, I whispered, though I didn't. I didn't understand any of this. The door closed softly. A moment later, the driver's door opened and Martin slid behind the wheel. The engine purred to life. Where are we going? I asked from beneath the blanket. To show you the truth about Zachary Palmer, Martin said. And then you're going to help me save your daughter. The world went dark under that blanket, but every sound became sharp, clear, dangerous. I'd been lying there maybe 10 minutes long enough for my back to start aching against the leather seat, long enough to wonder if Martin had lost his mind when the car slowed and pulled to a stop. I heard the crunch of gravel under tires, then silence. My heart hammered against my ribs. Where were we? The front passenger door opened with a soft click. Someone slid into the seat, and I caught a whiff of expensive cologne. Not Martin's usual subtle aftershave, but something bolder, younger. Morning, Martin? The voice was smooth, confident. Zachary Palmer, my future son-in-law. Good morning, Mr. Palmer. Martin's reply was perfectly neutral, professional. No hint of whatever fear I'd seen in his face 20 minutes ago. Beautiful day for a wedding, isn't it? Zachary settled into his seat. I heard the rustle of fabric, his tuxedo probably. I still can't believe this is really happening. Big day indeed, sir. The car began to move again. I focused on keeping my breathing slow and quiet. Under the heavy blanket, the air was getting warm, stuffy. I wanted to shift position, but didn't dare. Zachary's phone buzzed. "That'll be my bride," he said, and I heard the smile in his voice. "Hey, beautiful." Even through the blanket, through the sound of the engine, I could hear the change in his tone. Soft, warm, the voice of a man in love. "Yeah, no, I'm not nervous." "Well, maybe a little," he laughed. "You're going to take my breath away, aren't you? You always do." I felt my chest tighten. That was my daughter on the other end of that call. My Emberlyn probably standing in front of a mirror in her wedding dress, glowing with happiness. "I love you too," Zachary said. "See you at the altar, sunshine." Sunshine. He called her Sunshine. The call ended. For a moment there was only the hum of the engine and the muffled sound of traffic outside. I allowed myself to relax slightly. Maybe Martin was wrong. Maybe this was all some misunderstanding. The man I'd just heard sounded genuinely devoted to my daughter. Then Zachary's phone rang again. "Jesus," he muttered. His whole tone shifted, the warmth gone, replaced by something cold and clipped. He answered. "I told you not to call this number." I went rigid under the blanket. No, I can't talk right now. I'm in the car. With the driver." A pause. I could hear a tinny voice on the other end, words too faint to make out, but the urgency was clear. I said we'd handle it. Everything is on track. The voice on the phone got louder, more insistent. "Look." Zachary's voice dropped lower, harder. 3 months, not before. We agreed on the timeline. Don't call me again until... He stopped abruptly, then finished in a harsh whisper. "Until it's done." He ended the call with more force than necessary. The silence that followed felt thick enough to choke on. "Everything all right, Mr. Palmer?" Martin asked, his voice still perfectly even. "Oh, fine. Just some business that won't wait." Zachary's attempt at a casual laugh fell flat. "You know how it is. People think just because it's your wedding day, the whole world stops." "Indeed, sir. But I heard something in Zachary's breathing. Quick, shallow, stressed. 3 months. Not before, until it's done." What did that mean? What was supposed to happen in 3 months? And who was calling him so urgently that they'd risk phoning on his wedding day? Under the blanket, my hands curled into fists. That second call hadn't sounded like love. It hadn't sounded like business either. It sounded like something else entirely. Something that made my future son-in-law's voice go cold and calculating. I tried to piece it together. The warmth with Emberlyn, then the ice with whoever that was. 2 different people in the same man, or maybe, and this thought made my stomach drop, maybe the warmth was the act, and the cold was what lay underneath. "Chiquia, we're taking a different route today, Mr. Palmer," Martin said calmly. "Construction on the main road." "Oh, sure, whatever you think is best." Zachary didn't seem to care where we were going. He pulled out his phone again. I heard the soft tap-tap of typing. Texting someone. More business that couldn't wait. Or was he texting whoever had just called? I lay there in the darkness, breathing as quietly as I could, listening to every shift of fabric, every tap of his phone, every change in the engine's pitch, as Martin navigated through traffic. This was what Martin wanted me to hear. This was why he'd shoved me into this car. But why? What did Martin know that I didn't? "Oh, okay, Sonny, how long have you worked for the Caldwells?" Zachary asked suddenly. 20 years this September, sir." "That's a long time. You must be close to the family." "I consider it an honor to serve them." Something in Martin's phrasing made me think of that promise he'd mentioned. The promise he'd made to Caroline. What exactly had my wife asked him to do? "Pete seems like a good man," Zachary continued. "Little old-fashioned, maybe, but solid. The kind of father-in-law who'll want to stay involved, I imagine. Mr. Caldwell loves his daughter very much. I'm counting on that." Zachary's voice had an odd quality I couldn't quite identify. "A man who loves his daughter will do anything to see her happy, won't he?" "I expect so, sir." Good. That's good. The way he said it made the hair on the back of my neck stand up. It wasn't the words themselves, they were perfectly innocent, but the tone underneath, like he was working through some private calculation. 3 months. Everything is on track. My mind spun with possibilities, each darker than the last. Was he planning something? Was Ember Lynn in danger? But that didn't make sense. Why would he marry her if he meant her harm, unless the marriage itself was part of whatever plan he had? The car made a turn, and I felt myself slide slightly against the seat. Martin must have noticed, because he spoke up quickly. Hit a rough patch there. Road work everywhere these days. No kidding, Zachary replied, distracted. His phone buzzed again. Sorry, I need to take this. But this time when he answered, his voice was careful. Hey. Yeah, I'm on my way. No, we're good. I'll call you later, okay? Yeah. Later. He ended the call fast. Too fast. Like he didn't want anyone Martin to hear too much. The pieces weren't fitting together yet, but I knew I was hearing something important. Something that explained the fear in Martin's eyes this morning. In the darkness under that blanket, with nothing to go on but sounds and fragments of conversation, I felt dread pooling in my gut like cold water. 3 months, not before, until it's done. What was going to happen in 3 months? And what did it have to do with my daughter's wedding day? I didn't have answers yet, but I knew with a certainty that made my chest ache that Martin was right to be afraid. 3 months on track for what my stomach twisted with a dread I couldn't name yet. 20 minutes into what should have been a straight shot to St. Benedict's Cathedral. Martin turned south. I felt it, before I understood it, the pull of gravity as the sedan banked left, the shift in momentum telling me we were heading away from downtown. Beneath the blanket, I had only sensation to guide me, the engine's hum, the rhythm of stops and starts, sunlight warming the fabric against my face. This turn felt wrong. My internal compass screamed at me. St. Benedict's was north and east, a straight 15-minute drive through oak-lined streets. This route had too many turns, too much stop-and-go traffic. We were heading south, away from the cathedral, away from the wedding. In the front seat, Zachary's phone buzzed, harsh, insistent vibrations, demanding attention. "Damn it," he muttered. I heard fabric rustle as he checked the screen. Another buzz, then another. "Everything all right, Mr. Palmer?" Martin asked, his voice carefully neutral. "Yeah, fine." Zachary paused, weighing something. "Actually, Martin, I need to make a quick stop. Won't take more than 5 minutes." "Course, sir. Where to?" "Maple Street, South Side. You know it. No hesitation. None at all." "Yes, sir, I know it." That was when I knew. Martin hadn't been surprised. He'd been expecting this. That's why he'd hidden me in the back seat. That's why we were driving south instead of north. Martin had planned this. The sedan accelerated, merging onto what felt like a highway, smooth concrete rushing traffic distance covered quickly. Route 9, probably. The industrial corridor cutting through the city's midsection before dipping into the working neighborhoods. Through the gap in the blanket, I caught glimpses of harsh sunlight hitting concrete without the filter of trees. The air felt different, thicker, grittier. Exhaust and hot pavement. We slowed. Traffic lights, frequent stops, city driving in a neighborhood where people lived close together. "Next light, take a left," Zachary said, his voice stripped of charm. 2 blocks down. Understood. The road changed, rougher pavement potholes jarring the suspension. Streets that got repaired last, if at all. Through the fabric, I sensed buildings changing around us, taller structures giving way to shorter ones, glass replaced by brick and siding, dogs barking, children's voices, a metal gate clanging shut. This was a neighborhood where people hung laundry on lines, where corner stores sold lottery tickets, where families packed into townhouses and made the best of what they had. The middle ground, where most people lived, a world Zachary Palmer had never mentioned. Here, he said. The one with the blue trim. Tires crunched over gravel. The engine idled to a low rumble. Zachary's door opened. Just give me a few minutes. Of course, sir. His footsteps faded quick strides across uneven pavement. A gate creaked. Then silence. Mr. Caldwell. Martin's whisper was urgent. Look now. But stay down. I shifted the blanket just enough to see through the gap between the seats. We were parked before a narrow townhouse. 2 stories. Blue-gray siding faded to weathered denim. A small porch with rusted railing. The yard was overgrown grass, bordered by a leaning chain-link fence. At the end of a cracked walkway stood a mailbox. Nothing special, just standard metal, bolted to a wooden post that tilted left. Peeling paint. Worn edges. But the letters stenciled across its side were clear. The Palmer family. I stared, my brain stuttering over the words. Palmer. Zachary's name. The man marrying my daughter in less than 3 hours. The man who'd told us his parents were dead. No siblings, nobody to invite except college friends. The man who'd said he was alone in the world. That Emberlyn and I would be his whole family. So why was there a mailbox with his name on a working-class townhouse? Present tense. The Palmer family. As if people named Palmer still lived here. Still received mail here. Still called this home. Zachary walked up the cracked steps. He didn't knock. His hand went straight to the doorknob, twisted it, pushed the door open like he'd done it 1,000 times. Like he belonged there. The door swung inward, revealing only shadow, and Zachary stepped inside. It closed behind him with a soft click. I stared at that closed door, heart pounding. Palmer. The Palmer family. This wasn't the story he'd told us over dinner at our estate, or during the engagement party, or in any conversation over the past 2 years. This was something hidden. Something he'd kept locked away from Emberlyn and me. My hands curled into fists beneath the blanket. Palmer. That was his name. But why did he have a mailbox here? Why did he walk into this house like he owned it? And why on the morning of his wedding to my daughter did he need to stop here at all? Martin opened my door and leaned in close, his voice barely a breath in the cool morning air. Mr. Caldwell, you need to see this with your own eyes. Stay low. Watch the side entrance. I didn't argue. Whatever Martin had brought me here to witness, whatever truth hid behind that faded blue door with Zachary Palmer's name on the mailbox, I needed to see it. For Emberlyn. For myself. For the promise I'd made to Caroline 5 years ago, when she squeezed my hand on her deathbed and whispered, "Take care of our girl." I unfolded myself from the cramped back seat joints, protesting each movement. 62 years old, crouching behind a sedan like a private investigator in a bad crime novel. But this wasn't fiction. This was my daughter's future unraveling in real time. Martin positioned himself between me and the house, blocking the view from the front windows. I stayed low, using the car as cover eyes fixed on the narrow alley beside the townhouse. The side entrance, Martin mentioned a weathered door with peeling white paint half hidden by an overgrown hedge. The morning sun beat down on cracked pavement, heat shimmering in the air. Somewhere down the block, a screen door slammed. A dog barked twice, then fell silent. Normal sounds. A normal Saturday morning in a normal neighborhood. Except nothing about this was normal. I heard the front door open and close the solid thunk of wood meeting frame. Zachary's footsteps echoed on the porch, then faded as he moved deeper inside. My heart hammered each beat, a question without an answer. What is he doing here? Who lives here? Why today? Minutes dragged by. 2, 3, 4. Each second stretched unbearably long. Then the side door opened. A woman stepped out first. Early 30s. Dark hair pulled into a messy ponytail. Jeans and a faded gray t-shirt worn thin by too many washes. She looked exhausted, the kind of tired that comes from sleepless nights and unpaid bills. Her face was drawn, eyes shadowed, but her jaw was set with stubborn resolve. A woman used to carrying weight she shouldn't carry alone. She crossed her arms defensively and turned back toward the open doorway. Zachary, please. You can't keep doing this. Her voice was soft, but strained, pulled tight like wire. I couldn't hear his reply from inside, but I didn't need to. Her expression said enough frustration, resignation, fear. Then I heard it, a child's voice, high-pitched, excited, from inside the house. Daddy, Daddy. The word struck me like a blow to the chest. Daddy. A little girl burst through the side door, small feet pounding on the steps. She couldn't have been more than 4 blonde curls, bouncing pink sneakers, flashing a stuffed rabbit clutched in one hand. She wore a yellow sundress, with daisies, the kind a father chooses, because it makes his child smile. Daddy! She cried again, running toward the doorway, and Zachary Palmer stepped out to catch her. He scooped her up effortlessly, lifting her high as she squealed with joy. She wrapped her arms around his neck, burying her face against his shoulder. He held her close, not like a stranger, not like a visitor, but like a man who had done this 1,000 times. Like a father. Hey, sweetheart, he murmured, voice gentle in a way I'd never heard. He kissed the top of her head, fingers soft in her curls. I can't stay long today. But why? She pulled back bottom lip, trembling. You said you'd play tea party with me and Mr. Floppy. She held up the stuffed rabbit. His smile faltered for half a second, then returned, practiced familiar, the same charm he'd used on Emberlyn. On me. On everyone who trusted him. I know, baby. I'm sorry. Daddy has to work today. But I'll be back soon. I promise. Liar. The word screamed inside my head. He wasn't going to work. He was going to St. Benedict's Cathedral. He was going to stand at the altar in a tailored tuxedo and vow himself to my daughter. Promise her forever, while this child waited at home for a father building a second life. The woman, his wife, she had to be stepped closer, arms still crossed. Zach, we need to talk about. Not now, Marley. His voice sharpened, warmth draining instantly. He set the child down, gently ruffling her hair. Mia, go inside and finish breakfast. Mommy and I need a minute. Mia. Her name was Mia. She hesitated. Sensing tension, then ran back inside, Rabbit trailing behind her. Marley watched her disappear, then faced Zachary again, voice low and urgent. You can't keep lying to her. She asks about you every day. She doesn't understand why you're gone. I'm handling it. Handling it. Her voice cracked. You're getting married today. To someone else. How is that handling anything? My breath caught. She knew. About Emberlyn, about the wedding, everything. Zachary glanced around, scanning the street, fear flickering. His eyes passed Martin's sedan past me without stopping. I stayed frozen, heart pounding. I told you the plan, he said coldly. 1 year. With the Caldwell money, I pay off Greco. Then we're free. Mia gets the medical care she needs. We start over. And what about her, Marley whispered. What about Emberlyn? You'll ruin her life. She'll get over it. Rich people always do. I wanted to move, to stand, to confront him, demand answers, drag him away and make him explain how he could lie to my daughter's face. But I couldn't move. I could only listen as my nightmare confirmed itself. Zachary pulled Marley close, voice soft, almost tender. I'm doing this for us. For Mia. Trust me. She pulled away, eyes shining. I stopped trusting you a long time ago. He flinched, then walked toward the front without another word. Marley stood there, shoulders sagging, then went inside, closing the door quietly. I stayed crouched behind the car, mind spinning. Zachary Palmer had a wife. He had a daughter. And in less than 3 hours, he was going to marry Emberlyn. I should have confronted him right then and there. Every instinct I had was screaming at me to stand up, to walk across that cracked pavement, to grab Zachary Palmer by his collar and demand the truth in front of his wife and his daughter and God himself. But Martin's hand landed on my shoulder, firm, steady, anchoring me in place. Wait. He whispered, his voice barely audible over the pounding of my heart. There's more. More. What more could there possibly be? The man was married. He had a child. He was about to commit bigamy in front of 200 wedding guests and a priest who believed every word of the vows Zachary would speak. But Martin's grip didn't loosen, and something in his tone told me he was right. Whatever I'd seen so far was only part of the picture, so I stayed low, crouched behind the sedan, like a man half my age, my knees aching and my hands balled into fists. Across the narrow yard, Mia's bright voice called out from inside the house. "Mommy, can I have more juice?" Marley glanced back through the open side door, her expression softening for just a moment. "In a minute, sweetheart. Go play with your toys for now, okay?" "Okay." The sound of small feet pattering away, a door closing somewhere deep in the house. Then Marley turned back to Zachary and the softness vanished. Her arms crossed over her chest again, that defensive posture I'd seen before, like she was trying to hold herself together by sheer force of will. "You're really going through with this?" Her voice was quiet, but there was an edge to it, something raw and desperate. Zachary didn't look at her. He was staring out at the street, his jaw tight, his hands shoved deep into his pockets. When he finally spoke, his voice was flat. Cold. "We don't have a choice. There's always a choice. Not when Greco's involved." He turned to face her then, and even from where I crouched, I could see the tension in his shoulders, the hard set of his mouth. "He gave us until the end of the year, Marley. That's it. If I don't pay him back by then." He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't need to. Marley's face went pale. "I know. But this Zach, she's a person. Emberlyn is a real person with real feelings. Her father seems like a decent man. This feels wrong. It feels evil. Their decency doesn't save Mia." Zachary's voice turned sharp, cutting through her protest like a blade. "Their money does." The words hit me like a punch to the gut. My money. My family's money. That's what this was about. That's what Emberlyn was to him, a bank account with a pretty face and a trusting heart. Marley shook her head, her eyes glistening. "And after, when she finds out, she won't. Zach, she won't." His tone left no room for argument. "Once I'm her legal husband, I'll have access to everything. Joint accounts, family trusts. The Caldwell portfolio is worth over $200 million, Marley. All I need is 1 year. 1 year to get what we need, pay off Greco, and disappear. She'll never even know what happened. 1 year." The timeline clicked into place in my mind, like puzzle pieces I'd been too blind to see before. The rushed engagement Zachary had proposed after only 6 months of dating. The quick wedding he'd insisted they get married this spring, instead of waiting for fall like Emberlyn had wanted. The way he'd charmed his way into every family dinner, every business meeting, every corner of our lives with that easy smile and those smooth words. He'd been planning this from the start. What if she files for divorce? Marley's voice was barely a whisper now. What if she goes to the police? Zachary let out a harsh laugh. Rich people don't go to the police. They go to their lawyers. And by the time her lawyers figure out what happened, we'll be long gone. New names, new city, new life. And Mia gets the medical care she needs, the surgeries, the specialists, everything she couldn't get while we're drowning in Greco's debt. His voice softened just slightly. That's what matters. Not some spoiled hotel heiress who'll cry into her champagne for a few months, and then move on to the next guy her daddy approves of. I wanted to scream, to stand up and tell him that Emberlyn wasn't spoiled, that she'd worked her entire life to earn her place in the company, that she'd mourned her mother with a grief that had nearly broken her, that she deserved so much better than this lying, calculating predator who saw her as nothing more than a means to an end. But Martin's hand was still on my shoulder, and his grip tightened as if he could sense my rage building. Wait, he breathed. Just wait. Marley wrapped her arms around herself, her shoulders hunching forward. I can't keep doing this, Zach. I can't keep lying to Mia. She asks about you every day. She doesn't understand why you're gone so much. It'll be over soon. Will it? Her voice cracked. Or will you just find another scheme, another woman to use? When does it end? Zachary's expression hardened. It ends when we're free of Greco. That's when it ends. He pulled out his phone, glanced at the screen, and cursed under his breath. I have to go. The wedding starts in less than 3 hours. Why, I'll call you tonight. He turned toward the front of the house without looking back. Keep Mia inside. I don't want her seeing me leave. She already knows you're here. Then distract her. His footsteps echoed on the wooden porch steps, then faded as he rounded the corner toward the street. Marley stood there for a long moment, her face buried in her hands. Then she straightened, wiped her eyes, and went back inside, closing the side door behind her with a soft click. I stayed frozen behind the sedan, my entire body shaking with a rage I could barely contain. Less than 1 year. That's how long Zachary Palmer had planned to stay married to my daughter. Less than 1 year to drain our family's accounts, pay off his debts, and vanish with his real wife and child, leaving Emberlyn with nothing but betrayal and a broken heart. My hands were still clenched into fists, my nails digging into my palms hard enough to draw blood. I wanted to chase him down, to drag him back here and make him confess everything, to call the police, the FBI, anyone who could stop this nightmare before it was too late. But Martin's voice cut through the haze of my anger. Mr. Caldwell. Quiet. Steady. There's more you need to know. Get back in the car. I turned to look at him, my vision blurring with fury. More. What else could there possibly be? Martin's face was grim. The worst part, after Zachary finished speaking with Marley and headed back toward the street, Martin moved fast. Mr. Palmer, he called, stepping around the sedan with practiced ease. I'm sorry, sir, but there's an issue with the car. The engine's making a strange noise. I don't want to risk breaking down on the way to the cathedral. Zachary stopped short, irritation flashing across his face. Today? Are you serious? I apologize, sir. It just started. Martin gestured toward the hood. With the wedding in less than 2 hours, I don't want to take any chances. Why don't you call a rideshare? I'll get this checked out and meet you at St. Benedict's. Zachary pulled out his phone, jaw tight. Fine. But if this makes me late, it won't, sir, I promise. Within minutes, a black SUV pulled up to the curb. Zachary climbed inside without another word. The vehicle drove off and disappeared around the corner. The moment he was gone, Martin turned back to the sedan, where I was still crouched behind the rear door, my heart slamming against my ribs. That was quick thinking, I said, my voice hoarse. Martin's expression remained grim. Get in, Mr. Caldwell. There's something else you need to see. I slid into the back seat, my legs stiff after being cramped so long. When the door shut, sealing us inside the quiet shell of the car, Martin reached into his jacket and pulled out his phone. There's more, he said. His voice was steady, but his eyes were dark. Something much worse. He unlocked the screen and turned it toward me. The first image was a screenshot of an email. The sender address was nothing but random letters and numbers. Anonymous. Untraceable. The message itself was unmistakable. Target 3 months post-wedding. Priority, make it look like an accident. No traces. $50,000 on completion. My blood turned cold. I read it again and again, trying to force the words to mean something else. Target, 3 months, accident, $50,000. Scroll, Martin said quietly. My hands shook as I swiped. The next image showed messages from an encrypted app, the kind used when people didn't want to be found. Subject leaves estate daily at 7:30 a.m. Takes Route 9 to downtown office. Black sedan. Usually alone except for driver. My schedule, my routine, my life reduced to notes. Tuesdays and Thursdays lunch meeting at Riverside Grill. Walks from parking garage, 2-block stretch, minimal foot traffic, every habit, every weakness. Friday evenings private club on Hamilton Street. Valet parking. Returns to vehicle alone around 10 p.m. The club I'd felt safe in for decades. Keep going, Martin said. I swiped again. A bank transfer record appeared. $10,000 sent from an unfamiliar shell company. The memo line read, "Deposit services pending completion." Deposit. Not payment, meaning the rest would come later, after I was dead. My vision blurred. The phone trembled in my hands. He's planning to. I couldn't finish. Yes, Martin said. Zachary Palmer hired someone to kill you. 3 months after the wedding. Once he's legally married to Emberlyn and has access to the family accounts. Everything snapped into place. The rushed engagement. The sudden wedding. The 1-year timeline Marley mentioned. It was never about staying married. It was about surviving long enough to become a widower. No divorce, no court battles. Just a tragic accident and a grieving son-in-law positioned to inherit everything when the patriarch died. The call this morning, I whispered. In the car. When he said 3 months, that was confirmation, Martin said. He was finalizing the timeline with the person he hired. The memory replayed clearly. Zachary's tense voice. His nervous glance. Everything is on track. 3 months. Not 1 day sooner. Not a business deal. A murder. How did you find this? I asked. I've been watching him for 2 weeks, Martin said. Ever since he started asking questions about your schedule, about your routines, things that didn't make sense. You were spying on him. I installed monitoring software on his laptop when he left it unattended at the estate last week. He didn't flinch. I needed confirmation. I found this yesterday. Does he know? No, it runs quietly. And Marley, I asked. Does she know about this? Martin shook his head. She knows about the fraud, the money, but not this. My hands trembled as I opened my own phone and began photographing each screen. The email, the messages, the bank transfer. One by one, evidence. Proof that Zachary wasn't just a liar or a thief. He was planning murder. Click. Another photo. Click. Another. I documented every word, every detail. Mr. Caldwell, Martin said gently. Are you all right? I wasn't. How could I be? My daughter's fiancé had ordered my death. Every smile, every dinner, every handshake had been part of a countdown. But I nodded. I have everything. Good. We'll need it. I stared at the screenshots once more. At the cold language that turned my life into a target and my death into completion. At the $50,000 assigned to my existence. 3 months. That's how long he planned to wait. 3 months after marrying Emberlyn. 3 months after gaining access. 3 months after securing his position. My daughter would lose her father. She would grieve, and the man who ordered my death would hold her while she cried. The thought made me nauseous. I looked at Martin. He was going to make her a widow. She'd spend her life believing it was an accident. I know, Martin said. We sat in silence. The sun beat against the roof. A door slammed somewhere nearby. A dog barked. Normal sounds. Inside the car, I held proof of a murder-for-hire plot. This wasn't about money anymore. This was far more dangerous. I needed answers. And the woman inside that house was the only person who could give them to me. I need to talk to her. I said, my voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through my veins. To Marley. Martin's eyes widened slightly. Mr. Caldwell, are you sure Zachary could come back? He won't. Not for a while. He thinks you're fixing the car. I reached for the door handle. I need to understand why. And I need her at that church. Martin hesitated, then nodded. I'll keep watch. I stepped out of the sedan and walked across the cracked pavement toward the blue-gray townhouse. Each step felt heavier than the last, weighted with the knowledge of what I'd just learned. My heart hammered as I climbed the wooden steps to the small porch. I raised my hand and knocked. Footsteps inside. Quick. Light. The door opened, and Marley Palmer stood there, her expression shifting from hope to confusion to something close to panic in the span of a heartbeat. "Zachary, did you forget?" She stopped mid-sentence when she saw me. Her face went pale. "Mr. Caldwell, how did you—" "I know everything." My voice came out harder than I intended. "Now you're going to tell me the truth." For a moment, she just stared at me. Then her shoulders sagged, and something inside her seemed to break. She stepped back, opening the door wider. "Come in." The house was small but tidy. Worn furniture that had seen better days. Children's toys scattered across a threadbare rug, the kind of home where people made do with what they had and tried to pretend it was enough. From somewhere deeper in the house, I heard a child's laughter. Mia, playing with her toys, oblivious to the nightmare her father had created. Marley closed the door behind me and leaned against it, her arms wrapped around herself like she was trying to hold herself together. "How much do you know?" "Enough. The secret marriage, the plan to steal from my family, the 1-year timeline." I paused, watching her face. "And the part about eliminating me 3 months after the wedding." Her eyes went wide. "What? You didn't know about that part, did you?" She shook her head, her hand flying to her mouth. "Oh my God, no. I didn't." Her voice cracked. "He wouldn't." "Would he?" "He already has. There's a contract. A deposit's been paid." Marley sank into a chair, her face buried in her hands. I knew he was desperate. But I didn't think he'd... She looked up at me, tears streaming down her face. "I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry." "Tell me why," I said. "Tell me all of it." She took a shaky breath and began. "We owe Anthony Greco nearly $500,000. Zachary made bad investments, got in over his head with some startup that crashed. When the money dried up, he went to Greco for a loan. Then Mia was born premature, 2 months early. The NICU bills alone were over $95,000. Specialists, surgeries, equipment." Her voice trembled as she spoke, each word heavy with exhaustion and fear. "Greco gave us a deadline, end of the year. He said if we didn't pay by then, She couldn't finish, but she didn't need to. The threat was clear enough. He'd take Mia," I said quietly. Marley nodded, wiping her eyes. "Zachary panicked. He started looking for ways to get money fast. That's when he found your daughter, at some networking event. He saw an opportunity, a wealthy family, a trusting woman. And he..." Her voice broke. "He saw a way out." I felt sick. Emberlyn had been nothing more than a target, a means to an end. "But you tried to stop it," I said, remembering the pieces Martin and I had overheard. "Didn't you?" Marley's head snapped up, her eyes red and swollen. "Yes. God, yes, I tried. I swear I tried, Mr. Caldwell." She stood and disappeared into another room, returning moments later with a folder. She opened it on the coffee table, spreading out its contents with trembling hands. 3 weeks ago, I sent an anonymous letter to Emberlyn's office, warning her about Zachary, that he wasn't who he said he was. She showed me a handwritten draft, the words shaky but clear. "The man you're about to marry is hiding something. Please investigate before it's too late." 2 weeks ago, I called her. I got through to her assistant, said it was urgent. But before I could say more than a few words, Zachary came home early. He heard me on the phone. He twun. She touched her wrist, and I saw the faint shadow of an old bruise. He took the phone, deleted the call log, told me if I ever tried again, I'd never see Mia. That he'd take her and disappear, and I'd spend the rest of my life wondering if she was alive. My hands curled into fists. Last week I tried to send an email from the library, but Zachary has spyware on my computer, on my phone. He knew within hours. He deleted the draft before I could send it. She pulled out a phone showing me her deleted items folder, an unsent email to Ember Lynn's personal address, a warning that never made it. "June, I kept copies," Marley whispered. "Everything. The letter. The phone records showing I called her office. The email draft. I knew if something went wrong, I'd need proof that I tried." She reached into the folder and pulled out more documents. A marriage certificate with her and Zachary's names, dated 5 years ago. Photos of them together, younger, happier before Greco, and debt and desperation had twisted everything into this nightmare. I have everything here," she said. "Proof of our marriage. Proof that Mia is his daughter. Proof that I tried to warn your daughter and he stopped me." Her voice broke. "I wanted to save her. I wanted to protect her from him. But I couldn't. I was too afraid of losing Mia." I looked at the folder at the evidence of a woman trapped between her child and her conscience. She'd tried. In her own terrified way, she'd tried to stop Zachary. And Ember Lynn had never known. "Did Ember Lynn ever see the letter?" I asked. Marley shook her head. "I don't know. Maybe her assistant threw it away. Maybe she thought it was a prank. I never heard back. The anonymous warnings. The strange call that never went through. Ember Lynn had probably dismissed them as wedding jitters or jealous rivals. She'd never known how close someone had come to saving her. I met Marley's eyes. "You're going to come to the church. With Mia. With that folder. This ends today." She looked terrified. "He'll kill me. He's already planning to kill me. And he's about to destroy my daughter's life." I kept my voice firm. "You have a choice, Marley. Help me stop him, or let him turn Ember Lynn into a widow and leave you and Mia with nothing but guilt." For a long moment she said nothing. Then slowly she nodded. "Okay, we'll come." I looked at the folder again. At the proof of Marley's desperate attempts to save a woman she'd never met. At the evidence that my daughter had been warned and had never known it. She'd tried to save Ember Lynn, and my daughter had ignored every warning. By the time we left Maple Street, it was nearly 8:45. The wedding at St. Benedict's would begin in just over an hour. Martin drove in silence the sedan, cutting through the late morning traffic with practiced efficiency. I sat in the back. My phone clutched in one hand, Marley's folder of evidence beside me on the seat. My mind raced with possibilities, each one worse than the last. "I should go home," I said suddenly. "I should tell her right now, before any of this goes further." Martin's eyes met mine in the rearview mirror, steady and knowing. "With all due respect, sir, she won't believe you. Not without proof she can see with her own eyes." I wanted to argue, but I knew he was right. 2 months ago I'd tried. Not directly, I hadn't known enough then to be direct. But I'd asked careful questions over dinner. Innocent inquiries about Zachary's past, his family, his career before he'd met Ember Lynn. And my daughter had shut me down. "Dad, if you don't like him, just say it," she'd said, her voice tight with frustration. "But don't make up reasons to push him away. I love him. And I thought you'd be happy for me." I'd backed off, apologized, told her I just wanted to make sure she was making the right choice, that I trusted her judgment. But the truth was, I'd been afraid. Afraid of the distance that had already started to grow between us since Caroline died. Afraid that if I pushed too hard, I'd lose Ember Lynn completely. So I'd stayed silent. And Zachary had used that silence to burrow deeper into our lives. I should have done a background check." I said the words bitter on my tongue. "Why didn't I do that?" Because Miss Ember Lynn asked you to trust her choice," Martin said quietly. "And you respected that." "I respected it right into a trap. You were being a good father, sir." Zachary Palmer is a professional liar. He's fooled everyone. I looked out the window at the familiar streets of our neighborhood, the tree-lined avenues, the manicured lawns, the world where people like Zachary Palmer weren't supposed to exist. You suspected something, I said. Didn't you? Martin hesitated, then nodded. 2 weeks ago, I started noticing inconsistencies. Small things. The way he asked questions about your routine. His interest in the family's financial structure. So I took it upon myself to investigate. Without telling me, I needed to be certain before I brought it to you, sir. I've been with your family for 20 years. I wasn't about to accuse your daughter's fiancé without solid proof. 20 years. Martin had been there when Emberlyn was 10, when Caroline was diagnosed, when we'd buried her 5 years ago, and Emberlyn had clung to my arm at the funeral, both of us trying not to fall apart. He'd earned the right to protect us. Even from threats I'd been too blind to see. She won't believe me if I tell her alone, I said more to myself than to Martin. She'll think I'm jealous, or controlling, or trying to ruin her happiness. Yes, sir. But if she sees it herself, Marley Mia, the marriage certificate, all of it in front of everyone at the church, she'll have no choice but to accept the truth. The plan crystallized in my mind. Brutal. Public. Devastating, but necessary. I pulled out my phone and started making calls. First, my lawyer. Douglas Whitmore had been handling the Caldwell family's legal affairs for 30 years. He picked up on the second ring. Doug, I need you at St. Benedict's Cathedral, before the wedding, with a legal team. I'll explain when you get there, but this is urgent. His voice was sharp with concern, but he didn't ask questions. I'll be there in 20 minutes. Next, the police. I explained the situation as clearly as I could, bigamy fraud, a potential threat to my life. The detective on the line promised to send officers to the church discreetly. We'll coordinate with you, Mr. Caldwell, but we'll need solid evidence. You'll have it. Finally, I called Marley. She answered on the first ring, her voice shaky. Mr. Caldwell, you and Mia need to come to the church. Use the back entrance on Hamilton Street. 9:45. I'll have someone waiting to bring you inside. I'm scared. I know. But this is the only way to protect your daughter. And mine. She was quiet for a long moment. Then, we'll be there. I ended the call and leaned back against the seat, closing my eyes. A memory surfaced unbidden and sharp. Caroline. 5 years ago. Lying in a hospital bed, her face pale, her hand so small and fragile in mine. The cancer had taken so much from her already. Her strength, her energy, her certainty about the future, but not her fierceness. Not when it came to Emberlyn. Pete, she'd whispered, her voice hoarse. Promise me something. Anything. No, protect our girl. Even when she doesn't understand. Especially when she doesn't understand. I'd squeezed her hand, fighting back tears. I promise. Sometimes love means breaking their heart to save their life. I hadn't understood then. Not really. But I understood now. I was about to walk into St. Benedict's Cathedral and destroy the happiest day of my daughter's life. I was about to humiliate her in front of 200 guests, reveal that the man she loved was a fraud, and shatter every dream she'd built over the past 2 years. And she would hate me for it, at least for a while. But she would be alive, safe, free from Zachary Palmer and his plans to use her and discard her and eventually leave her a widow. Martin pulled the sedan into our estate's driveway. The house stood quiet and elegant in the morning sun, its windows gleaming, the gardens in full bloom. Everything looked perfect, peaceful, a lie just like Zachary. We have 45 minutes, Martin said, checking his watch. I nodded, gripping the folder Marley had given me. Then let's make sure we're ready. I looked at the house one more time, the home where Emberlyn had grown up, where Caroline had taught her to ride a bike and bake cookies and believe in happy endings. I was about to ruin the happiest day of my daughter's life, and it was the only way to save her. When I stepped through the front door of our home, I had to pretend this was the happiest day of my life. Morning sunlight poured through the tall windows of the entrance hall. White roses and lilies filled every vase, their perfume heavy in the air. Everything looked flawless. Wedding day perfect. From upstairs came laughter, women's voices bright and excited. The bridesmaids helping Emberlyn get ready. Then I heard her, "Dad, Dad, is that you?" I looked up. Emberlyn appeared at the top of the staircase, her face lighting up when she saw me. She wore a white silk robe, her hair half-styled curlers pinned in place. Even unfinished, she looked radiant. "Where have you been?" she asked, as she hurried down bare feet, soft against the carpet. "I was worried. You left so early, and Martin mentioned something about the car." I forced a smile. The smile a father wears on his daughter's wedding day. "Just needed some fresh air, sweetheart." Big day. She reached the bottom and wrapped her arms around me, burying her face in my shoulder. I held her tighter than necessary, memorizing the feel of her knowing what I was about to do. "I'm so nervous," she whispered. "But I'm happy, Dad. I really am. Zachary is... he's everything I hoped for." The words cut deep. I closed my eyes and kissed the top of her head, breathing in her shampoo. Lavender and vanilla, the same scent Caroline used to buy when Emberlyn was little. "I know, honey." She pulled back, eyes shining. "I just wish Mom could be here today. She would have loved this." My throat tightened. I brushed a strand of hair from her face the way I had since she was a child. "She is here," I said softly, "always with us." Emberlyn's smile trembled. "You really think so?" "I know so, and she'd want me to protect you." Emberlyn, a bridesmaid, called from upstairs. "We need you hair and makeup." Emberlyn laughed and wiped her eyes. "Coming." She turned back to me, glowing. "I have to finish getting ready. You'll walk me down the aisle, right, like we practiced. I wouldn't miss it." She hugged me again, quick and fierce. "I love you, Dad." "I love you too," I said. "More than you know." She kissed my cheek and ran upstairs, the white silk robe fluttering behind her. I stood there watching her disappear around the corner. In less than 2 hours, I was going to break her heart. I would stand before 200 people and expose the man she loved as a liar, a bigamist, a criminal planning to steal from our family, and worse. I would destroy this beautiful moment publicly and completely. She would hate me. Maybe not forever. Maybe one day she'd understand I'd done it to save her, to protect her from a man who saw her as nothing but a bank account. But right now she loved him. She believed in him. She'd built her future around becoming his wife. I moved through the house like a ghost. Past the dining room where Zachary had shared meals with us. Past Caroline's study, her books still lining the shelves, her glasses resting where she left them. Past the living room where 3 months ago Zachary had knelt and proposed while I watched my daughter's face light up with joy. I had said yes, shaken his hand, welcomed him into our family, because I trusted Emberlyn, because I wanted her happy, because I was afraid of asking questions that might push her away. Now I was paying for that trust. I stopped before the portrait in the hallway. Caroline and me on our wedding day. She wore white lace holding peonies. I wore a tuxedo slightly too big and a nervous smile. We were young. Certain love was enough. "I'm sorry," I whispered. "I should have seen it sooner." Her painted smile didn't change. Her eyes, Emberlyn's eyes, looked back at me. Sometimes love means breaking their heart to save their life. I checked my watch. 9:20. 40 minutes until the church. 40 minutes until everything changed. Upstairs, laughter continued. Music played. Bridesmaids talked about flowers and photos and how beautiful Emberlyn looked. She had no idea. For these last minutes, I would let her believe. Let her have this final moment of joy. Once I stood up in that church, her world would shatter. She would see me not as her protector, but as the man who ruined her happiest day. But she would be alive. She would be safe. And someday, God willing, she would forgive me. I turned from Caroline's portrait and walked toward my study to change into my tuxedo. In less than 2 hours, I would break my daughter's heart. But right now, I would let her have this moment. The ride to St. Benedict's felt like a funeral procession, even though everyone else was smiling. I sat beside Emberlyn in the back of the white limousine, watching the city drift past through the tinted windows. She held her bouquet of white roses and baby's breath in her lap, fingers trembling slightly against the silk ribbon. She looked breathtaking. The wedding dress Caroline and I had helped her choose fit her perfectly, lace sleeves, a sweetheart neckline, a long train meant to glide down the cathedral aisle like something from a fairy tale. Her hair was pinned in soft curls, a simple veil secured with Caroline's vintage hairpin, the one her grandmother wore, the one Caroline wore on our wedding day. She looked so much like her mother, it made my chest ache. Dad, Emberlyn said softly, pulling me from my thoughts. She reached over and took my hand, squeezing it. My hands are shaking. Is that normal? I looked at our joined hands, hers small and delicate, mine rough from decades of work. I could feel her pulse racing beneath her skin. Completely normal, sweetheart. Silence settled between us, filled only by the hum of the engine and distant traffic. The driver guided us through familiar streets, carrying us closer to St. Benedict's Cathedral, closer to the moment everything would collapse. Dad, Emberlyn said again, quieter now. Do you like Zachary? I mean, really like him? The question struck hard. I turned to her and saw the vulnerability in her eyes, the same look she'd worn as a child, asking if she was good enough, smart enough, lovable enough. She needed reassurance, and I couldn't give it. What matters, I said carefully, is that you're happy. Her brow furrowed. That's not what I asked. No, it wasn't. I lifted my hand and touched her face the way I had when she was small. I've always wanted what's best for you, Emberlyn. That will never change. She studied me for a long moment, searching for something I refused to give. Then she relaxed and leaned her head against my shoulder, just like she used to during movie nights. I love you, Dad. I love you too, more than anything. We stayed that way as the city passed by. I watched streets I'd known my whole life slide past the window. Riverside Park, where I taught her to ride a bike. The cafe Caroline and I visited every Sunday. The corner where I pulled over 5 years ago after the hospital called to say Caroline was gone. The same streets, but nothing was the same. My phone vibrated in my pocket. I shifted carefully and checked it. Martin, Marley, and Mia are en route. Back entrance secured. Officers in position. Everything is ready, sir. I typed back, understood. Work, Emberlyn asked. Martin confirming timing. She nodded, trusting, and rested her head against me again. Ahead, the spire of St. Benedict's rose into view, its stone facade catching the late morning sun. The same cathedral where Caroline and I were married 35 years ago. I remembered standing at the altar, hands shaking, breath stolen, when I saw her walking toward me in white lace. We'd promised forever, and we meant it. We built a life, raised a daughter, loved each other through everything, until cancer ended it. Now Emberlyn was about to stand at that altar with a man who planned to betray her. Not if I could stop it. The limousine slowed near the cathedral. Guests gathered on the steps. Photographers adjusted lenses. Curious strangers paused to watch. 200 guests, 200 witnesses, 200 people about to watch a dream shatter. We're here, Emberlyn whispered, sitting up. She smoothed her dress, checked her veil in the mirror tucked into her bouquet. Oh, God, this is really happening. Yes, I said. She turned to me, eyes shining with tears she believed were joy. Thank you for everything, for raising me, for supporting me, for always protecting me. The words cut deep. I cupped her face, looking into Caroline's eyes, memorizing this moment. I love you, Emberlyn. No matter what happens today, no matter what you think of me after this, I love you more than my own life. She smiled, confused by my intensity, but too happy to question it. I know, Dad. I love you too. The driver opened the door. Sound rushed in, laughter, music, camera shutters. We'd stopped at the side entrance, away from the crowd. Emberlyn gathered her dress, preparing to step out. I watched her for one final second. She believed she was walking toward her happily ever after. I was about to protect her in the worst way possible, in a way that would make her hate me, but she would be alive. She would be safe, and someday she would understand. I stepped out and offered her my hand. It was time. We arrived at St. Benedict's 15 minutes early. The old stone cathedral stood as it had for more than a century, solid, unmoving, carrying the weight of countless ceremonies within its walls. Today it would carry mine. The Gothic structure rose against the late morning sky, its spire reaching upward like a prayer carved in stone. Stained glass windows depicted angels, saints, and moments of divine mercy, their colors softened by the light filtering in from outside. Thick stone walls kept the air cool even on warm days like this. Inside, the cathedral had been transformed. White roses and lilies lined the aisle, their fragrance blending with candle wax and old wood. Hundreds of candles flickered in polished brass holders, casting gentle shadows along the vaulted ceiling above. Everything looked perfect, beautiful, exactly as Emberlyn had imagined. Guests were beginning to arrive, business associates in tailored suits, longtime family friends in their finest clothes, distant relatives I hadn't seen in years. They smiled and nodded as they took their seats, whispering softly, admiring the flowers and the setting, commenting on how lovely Emberlyn would look as a bride. None of them knew what was coming. I guided Emberlyn toward the bride's preparation room, a small chamber off the main sanctuary, where she could make her final adjustments. The bridesmaids were already there, laughing, fixing her veil, making sure every curl was perfect. "I'll see you out there, sweetheart," I said, kissing her forehead. She squeezed my hand, eyes shining. "I love you, Dad. I love you too." I left her surrounded by excitement and certainty and walked back into the sanctuary. The space felt larger now, emptier despite the growing crowd. I made my way down the aisle toward the front pew reserved for the father of the bride. My footsteps echoed against the stone floor, each step drawing me closer to the altar. The same altar where Caroline and I had stood 35 years ago, promising forever. The same altar where her casket had rested 5 years ago, surrounded by flowers just like these. While Emberlyn and I sat in this same pew, trying to understand how the world could keep moving when ours had stopped. "Pete," a familiar voice called. I turned to see Douglas Whitmore approaching, hand extended. My lawyer. My friend for 3 decades. He wore an expensive suit and a confident smile. "Congratulations," he said, shaking my hand. "Big day. Zachary seems like a good man. You must be proud. If only you knew." I nodded. "Thank you, Douglas. Caroline would have loved this," he added gently. "She'd be so happy seeing Emberlyn like this." The words were meant kindly. They still hurt. "Yes," I said, "she would." Douglas patted my shoulder and moved on, leaving me alone near the front pew. I sat slowly, gripping the smooth wood. From here I could see everything: the altar, the rows filling with guests, the musicians near the organ, the photographer adjusting his lens. And near the side entrance I saw Martin, nearly invisible in his dark suit, scanning the room with practiced calm. Our eyes met. He gave a slight nod. My phone vibrated silently. I pulled it out. "Martin, package delivered." Back entrance. Mia briefed, "Secret game, stay quiet." Everything in position. I typed back, "Understood." The secret game had been Marley's idea. She'd knelt down and told Mia they were playing a special church game where she had to stay as quiet as a mouse to win a prize afterward. Mia thought it sounded wonderful. She didn't know she was about to watch her father's life collapse. I looked toward the altar again, imagining Zachary standing there, smiling, playing the devoted groom, while his real wife and child waited in a back room. "Caroline," I closed my eyes. "If you can hear me, help me do this right. Help me be strong enough." I imagined her sitting beside me like she used to during Sunday services, her thumb tracing circles in my palm, a silent reminder that we were never alone. Sometimes love means breaking their heart to save their life. She'd said that when she made me promise to protect Emberlyn no matter what. I never imagined it would mean this. The organ began to play softly. Conversations faded. Guests turned toward the front. The photographer moved into position. Reverend Jonathan Reed stepped out and took his place at the altar, Bible in hand, serene and ready. This was it. Soon the processional would begin. Bridesmaids would walk the aisle. Then Emberlyn, radiant, holding my arm, believing she was walking toward her forever. And I would stand beside her listening as Zachary Palmer spoke vows he never intended to keep. Until I stopped him. I looked around once more at the stained glass, the guests holding programs, the altar where joy and grief had already shaped my life. Saint Benedict stood silent, holding centuries of secrets. Today it would hold mine. The organ swelled. The ceremony was about to begin, and so was the truth. The music swelled. Everyone stood. Zachary Palmer stepped into view from the side entrance, looking like every father's dream son-in-law. The black tuxedo fit him perfectly tailored, elegant, expensive. His dark hair was styled just right, not a strand out of place. And that smile, that practiced, confident smile that had charmed Emberlyn, charmed me, charmed everyone who'd ever met him. He looked like a man in love, a man about to marry the woman of his dreams. He looked like a lie. Jason Hartley followed a step behind Zachary's best man, a college friend he'd introduced us to 6 months ago. Jason wore a matching tuxedo and a supportive grin, playing his part in this performance perfectly. Zachary took his place at the altar, standing beside Reverend Jonathan Reed. He adjusted his tie, clasped his hands in front of him, and turned to face the center aisle. Waiting, anticipating. The picture of a nervous groom on the happiest day of his life. I wanted to stand up right then, to shout the truth across the cathedral, to end this before it went any further. But I stayed in my seat, waiting, watching. The bridesmaids entered next, 3 of Emberlyn's college friends, dressed in soft pastel gowns that complemented the white roses lining the aisle. They carried small bouquets and walked in measured steps, smiling at the guests taking their positions at the front of the sanctuary. Then the music changed. The familiar notes of the bridal march filled the cathedral, that timeless melody that signals the moment everyone has been waiting for. The moment the bride appears, a collective murmur of anticipation rippled through the crowd. Guests shifted in their seats, craning their necks to see. Cameras and phones lifted, ready to capture the moment. The massive wooden doors at the back of the cathedral swung open, and there she was. Emberlyn stood framed in the doorway, backlit by the morning sun streaming through the entrance. Her wedding dress was everything she'd dreamed of, white lace and silk, elegant and timeless, with a train that would sweep down the aisle behind her like something from a fairy tale. Her veil cascaded down her back, held in place by Carolyn's vintage hairpin. The same one her mother had worn, the same one her grandmother had worn before that. She held a bouquet of white roses and lilies, her hands trembling slightly, and she was smiling, radiant, glowing with a happiness so pure and genuine it made my chest ache. She looked so much like Caroline on our wedding day, so beautiful, so full of hope and certainty and love. I stood and moved toward her, offering my arm. Our eyes met, and for just a second, I saw the little girl who used to hold my hand crossing the street, who used to climb into my lap when she had bad dreams, who used to believe her daddy could fix anything. "Ready, Dad," she whispered, her voice shaking with emotion. My throat tightened. I couldn't speak, couldn't trust my voice. So I just nodded and forced a smile. "Always," I finally managed to say. She tucked her hand into the crook of my elbow, and together we began the long walk down the center aisle. Every step felt like moving through water. Time seemed to slow, each moment stretching out, giving me too much time to think, to notice, to remember. I saw familiar faces as we passed, business partners I'd known for decades, friends who'd watched Emberlyn grow up, distant relatives who'd come from out of state for the wedding. They were all smiling, some wiping away tears, all of them believing they were witnessing something beautiful. Cameras flashed. Phones recorded. Everyone wanted to capture this moment, the father walking his only daughter down the aisle to meet her future husband. None of them knew what I knew. None of them had seen what I'd seen. My eyes found Zachary at the altar. He was watching Emberlyn walk toward him, his expression a perfect mask of love and adoration. His eyes were soft. His smile was gentle. He looked like a man who couldn't believe his luck, who couldn't wait to start his life with the woman he loved. Or maybe it was just a performance. The final act before the curtain fell. This is the last time I'll give her to you, I thought, looking at him. The last time. We reached the altar. Reverend Reed stood waiting, his Bible open, his expression warm and welcoming. Zachary stepped forward, his hand extending toward Emberlyn. The Reverend's voice carried across the cathedral, clear and ceremonial. Who gives this woman to be married to this man? This was the moment. The traditional question. The symbolic gesture of a father entrusting his daughter to her new husband. I looked at Zachary, at his outstretched hand, at the confident smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. Then I looked at Emberlyn, at her radiant face, at the trust and love shining in her eyes as she looked at the man she thought would be her husband. I do, I said, my voice carrying across the silent cathedral, and I'm about to take her back. I placed Emberlyn's hand in Zachary's. His fingers closed around hers gently, carefully, like he was holding something precious, like he was holding something he planned to use and discard. Emberlyn squeezed my hand one last time before letting go. I love you, Dad. I love you too, sweetheart. More than you'll ever know. I stepped back and moved to my seat in the front pew, sitting down slowly. From here, I had a perfect view of the altar, of Emberlyn and Zachary standing side by side, their hands joined, of Reverend Reed opening his Bible and beginning the ceremony. Hantu, dearly beloved, the Reverend began, his voice solemn and practiced. We are gathered here today in the sight of God and these witnesses to join this man and this woman in holy matrimony. The familiar words washed over the congregation. People settled into their seats, preparing to witness the vows, the exchange of rings, the pronouncement that would make Emberlyn and Zachary husband and wife. I watched Zachary's profile, the way he looked at Emberlyn, the way he held her hand, the way he smiled when she smiled. And all I could think was, in a few minutes, I'm going to destroy this. In a few minutes, everyone in this cathedral is going to know the truth, and nothing will ever be the same again. Reverend Reed spoke of love, trust, and honesty. Every word felt like a knife. Marriage. He began, his voice carrying across the cathedral with practiced authority, is a sacred covenant built upon trust between two people who have chosen to walk through life together. Trust. I looked at Zachary standing at the altar, his hand clasping Emberlyn's, his face a picture of solemn devotion. He's lying to everyone here. It is a bond, the Reverend continued, founded on honesty between two souls who have promised to share their lives, their dreams, and their truth with one another. Honesty, truth. The words hung in the air, heavy with irony. I watched Zachary nod slightly, as if he agreed with every syllable, as if he had any intention of living up to those words. He stood straight, his posture perfect, his expression serious and reverent. The kind of expression a good man wears when he's standing before God and making promises he intends to keep. His hand held Emberlyn's gently, protectively, like she was something precious he would guard with his life. It was a performance, and he was giving the show of a lifetime. I turned my gaze to Emberlyn. Her eyes were bright, shining with unshed tears of joy. She looked at Zachary like he was her whole world, like she couldn't imagine a future without him. Like every word the Reverend spoke was being written on her heart in permanent ink. She trusted him completely, absolutely, and he was about to betray her in the worst way possible. A marriage should not be entered into lightly. Reverend Reed said, his tone growing more serious, or unadvisedly, or without careful thought and consideration, and it should never be entered into with deceit. Deceit. My hands gripped the edge of the pew in front of me, my knuckles turning white. That's exactly what's happening. Every word the Reverend spoke was the polar opposite of what Zachary Palmer represented. Trust, honesty, commitment, devotion, sacred promises made before God. All lies. I'd stood at this same altar 35 years ago, in this same sanctuary, under this same vaulted ceiling. I'd been younger then, nervous, hopeful, terrified, and excited all at once. And Caroline had stood beside me in her white lace dress, holding my hand, just like Emberlyn was holding Zachary's now. The Reverend back then, a different man, but the same words, had asked us to make promises to each other. Promises we'd meant with every fiber of our being. Do you, Peter, take this woman to be your lawfully wedded wife? I do. Do you promise to love her, honor her, protect her in sickness and in health, for richer or for poorer, as long as you both shall live? I do, I promise, and I'd kept that promise. Through 30 years of marriage, through joy and hardship, through building a business and raising a daughter, through sleepless nights when Emberlyn was sick as a baby, through Caroline's diagnosis, through watching cancer slowly steal the woman I loved away from me one day at a time. I'd kept my promise until her last breath, until she'd squeezed my hand one final time in that hospital room and whispered, "Take care of our girl." Those vows had been real, sacred, built on love and truth, and a commitment that had lasted through everything life had thrown at us. But the vows Zachary was about to make, they were poison dressed up as promises. Charge. Reverend Reed said, his hands resting on the open Bible before him, requires commitment. It requires sacrifice. And above all, it requires truth. Truth. The word echoed through the cathedral, bouncing off stone walls that had heard that same word spoken at countless weddings over more than a century. My grip on the pew tightened. I could feel my pulse pounding in my temples, my heart hammering against my ribs. Every muscle in my body was tense, coiled, ready to move. Not yet. Wait. The Reverend paused, his eyes sweeping across the congregation. 200 people sat in those pews, all of them quiet, respectful, waiting for the ceremony to continue. Waiting for the moment when Zachary and Emberlyn would exchange rings and become husband and wife. None of them knew. None of them suspected. Before these two young people exchanged their vows, Reverend Reed said, his voice taking on the formal ceremonial tone required by tradition, "I am duty-bound by the laws of this state and the customs of this church to ask." My heart stopped. This was it. The moment every wedding ceremony included. The moment that was supposed to be a formality, a traditional question that no one ever answered. Except today, someone would. "If any person here present," the Reverend continued, his gaze moving slowly across the congregation, "she knows of any legal impediment or lawful reason why these two should not be joined together in holy matrimony." The silence that followed was thick, heavy, oppressive. I could feel 200 pairs of eyes focused on the altar. 200 people holding their breath, waiting for the question to pass unanswered, as it always did. I felt the weight of Caroline's promise pressing down on me. Protect our girl, even when she doesn't understand. Especially when she doesn't understand. Let them speak now. My hands gripped the pew so tightly I thought the wood might crack. My legs tensed, preparing to stand, preparing to do what I'd come here to do. This was the moment. The final opportunity to stop this wedding before it became legal and binding. The last chance to save Emberlyn from a man who planned to use her, betray her, and destroy everything we'd built as a family. The last chance to protect my daughter, even if it meant she'd hate me for it. Reverend Reed's final words hung in the air like a challenge. "Or forever hold your peace." I stood. The wooden pew creaked beneath me, the sound echoing through the cathedral like a gunshot in the silence. 1 second, 2 seconds, 3 seconds. Every eye in the sanctuary turned toward me. 200 faces, 200 expressions, shifting from peaceful anticipation to confusion to shock. I opened my mouth and spoke the words that would change everything. "I object." The cathedral erupted. Gasps rippled through the crowd, like a wave crashing against shore. Voices rose in a sudden cacophony of shock and disbelief. What? Did he just— Oh my God! At the altar, Emberlyn spun around her face, pale, her bouquet trembling in her hands. Dad! Her voice cracked on the word, a mixture of confusion and horror that cut straight through my chest. Zachary's expression flickered just for a split second. I saw it. Pure, unfiltered shock. His mask slipped, revealing the panic beneath. Then just as quickly, he pulled it back into place, schooling his features into bewilderment and concern. Mr. Caldwell. He started, but I didn't let him finish. Reverend Reed stood frozen at the altar, his Bible still open in his hands, his face a picture of stunned disbelief. In all his years of conducting weddings, he'd probably never had anyone actually answer that question. Mr. Caldwell, he said, his voice shaking slightly. This is highly irregular. Are you certain you wish to— I stepped out of the pew and into the center aisle. My legs felt steadier than they had any right to. My voice when I spoke was calm, clear, unwavering. I'm sorry, sweetheart, I said, looking directly at Emberlyn. But this wedding cannot proceed. Dad, what are you doing? Emberlyn's voice rose, tears already streaming down her face, smudging the makeup she'd spent hours perfecting. What are you doing? Behind me, I heard Douglas Whitmore stand. Pete, what's going on? Other voices joined his. Is he all right? Maybe it's stress. This is insane. Should someone call? I ignored them all. My eyes were locked on Zachary Palmer, watching as he carefully maintained his mask of confused concern. Mr. Caldwell. Zachary said, his voice taking on that smooth, reasonable tone he'd perfected over months of charming our family. I'm sure there's been some terrible misunderstanding. Perhaps we should discuss this privately. There's no misunderstanding, I said, my voice carrying across the cathedral. The only misunderstanding here is about who you really are, Zachary Palmer. A fresh wave of gasps and whispers swept through the crowd. I heard someone near the back say something about calling security. Someone else suggested I was having a breakdown. Let them think what they wanted. Zachary's jaw tightened, but he kept his expression neutral. Sir, I don't know what you think you know, but I know exactly who you are. I cut him off, my voice hardening. And I know exactly what you've done. Emberlyn stepped forward, her face streaked with tears, her hands shaking. Dad, please. You're embarrassing me. You're embarrassing everyone. I don't know what's gotten into you, but— Emberlyn. I turned to face her fully, and the look on her face nearly broke me. Confusion, betrayal, hurt. She was looking at me like I was a stranger, like I'd lost my mind, like I was the villain in this story. Sweetheart, I know this is hard. I know you don't understand, and I'm sorrier than you can possibly imagine. My voice caught, but I forced myself to continue. But you will understand. Soon. I promise you will. Understand what? She cried, her voice breaking on a sob. You're ruining my wedding. You're standing up here in front of everyone we know, and you're— She couldn't finish. She turned away, burying her face in her hands, her shoulders shaking. Zachary moved to her side, placing a protective hand on her shoulder, playing the role of supportive fiancé, comforting the bride whose unstable father was causing a scene. It's all right, he murmured to her loud enough for everyone to hear. We'll figure this out. Your father is clearly under a lot of stress. Don't you dare, I said, my voice dropping to something cold and dangerous. Don't you dare pretend to comfort her when you're the reason she's crying. Zachary's mask slipped again just for a heartbeat. His eyes met mine, and in that brief moment I saw the calculation there, the assessment. He was trying to figure out how much I knew, how much damage I could do, whether he could still salvage this. He couldn't. The whispers behind me had grown louder. I heard snippets of conversation. Never seen him like this? Poor Emberlyn. Should someone stop him? Douglas was making his way toward me, concern etched on his face. "Pete, I think we need to talk. Outside. Right now." But I wasn't leaving. Not until everyone at this cathedral knew the truth. I turned to face the congregation. 200 faces stared back at me, some confused, some concerned, some already judging me as the father who'd lost his mind and ruined his daughter's special day. They didn't know yet, but they would. I took a breath and let my voice carry across the stone walls of St. Benedict's Cathedral, across the same sanctuary where I'd married Caroline, where we'd baptized Emberlyn, where we'd said goodbye to my wife 5 years ago. "Zachary Palmer," I said clearly, "is not the man he claims to be." The cathedral fell silent. Even the whispers stopped. Every eye was on me now, waiting, wondering. Some probably still thinking I'd lost my mind. And I was about to tell them something none of them could believe. Before I continue, I need to know you're still here. Comment below with one word, hero, if you think I'm doing the right thing, or villain if you think I'm destroying my daughter's life. Because what happens next will define me forever. And a quick note, some of what follows has been dramatized for storytelling. If fictionalized elements aren't your preference, feel free to exit now, no judgment. But if you want to see the moment everything explodes, the moment the whole church sees the truth, keep watching. It's about to get real. Before anyone could react, I spoke the words I'd been holding back since this morning. Zachary Palmer is already married. He has a wife and a daughter. The cathedral exploded. "What? Oh my God! That can't be." Gasps and shocked whispers erupted from every corner of the sanctuary. 200 people reacting in unison, their voices overlapping in a cacophony of disbelief. Zachary stepped forward, his face a mask of outrage and wounded dignity. "That is absolutely insane, Mr. Caldwell. I think you're very confused." "I'm not confused," I said, my voice cutting through the noise. "I saw them this morning. Your wife Marley and your 4-year-old daughter." Emberlyn's voice broke through the chaos, small and shaking. "Dad, no. You're wrong. Zachary would never tell him Zachary. Tell Dad he's wrong." Zachary turned to her, reaching for her hands, his expression shifting to one of gentle concern. "Sweetheart, your father is clearly under an enormous amount of stress. Maybe we should get him some help." "I don't need help," I said coldly. "I need the truth to come to light." I turned toward the side entrance where Martin stood waiting. Our eyes met across the sanctuary. "Bring them in." The side door opened. Every head in the cathedral turned as a woman stepped through the doorway. She was thin, dressed in simple jeans and a cardigan, her dark hair pulled back in a messy ponytail. Her face was pale, her eyes red-rimmed. She held a folder in one hand, and she held the hand of a little girl with the other. The child was small, 4 years old maybe, with blonde curls that bounced as she walked. She wore a pink dress and clutched a stuffed rabbit under one arm. Her eyes were wide as she took in the massive sanctuary, the rows of people, the flowers and candles, and overwhelming strangeness of it all. The woman Marley walked slowly down the side aisle, her daughter's hand gripped tightly in hers. Every step seemed to take enormous effort, like she was walking through water, or toward her own execution. The cathedral had fallen completely silent. 200 people watched them approach, confusion written on every face. The little girl looked around nervously, intimidated by the crowd, by the tall stone walls, by the way everyone was staring at her and her mother. Then she saw him, Zachary, standing at the altar in his perfect black tuxedo, looking like a prince from a fairy tale. Her face lit up like the sun breaking through clouds. "Daddy." The word rang out across the cathedral, echoing off the vaulted ceiling, bouncing off stone walls, hitting every ear in the sanctuary with the force of a physical blow. The collective gasp that followed was like a wave crashing. The little girl let go of her mother's hand and ran her small feet pattering across the stone floor, her curls bouncing, her stuffed rabbit trailing behind her. "Daddy, Daddy." She was running straight toward the altar, toward Zachary. I watched it happen as if in slow motion. Watched Zachary's face drain of all color. Watched his careful mask shatter completely. Watched him stand frozen, paralyzed, unable to move or speak or do anything but stare at the little girl racing toward him with pure joy on her face. Emberlyn turned, following the sound of the child's voice. Her face was a picture of utter confusion. What? What is? The little girl reached the altar steps and threw herself at Zachary, wrapping her small arms around his legs, beaming up at him with absolute adoration. "You look so handsome, Daddy," she said, her voice high and sweet and completely guileless. "Are you getting married? Mommy said you were getting married." Zachary looked down at her, his mouth opening and closing like a fish pulled from water. No sound came out. Marley had stopped halfway down the aisle, tears streaming down her face. "I'm so sorry," she whispered, though her voice somehow carried in the deadly silence. "I'm so sorry." She forced herself to keep walking to close the distance to the altar. When she spoke again, her voice was stronger, steadier, though it shook with emotion. "My name is Marley Palmer," she said, looking directly at Emberlyn. "I'm his wife. We've been legally married for 5 years." She held up the folder, opening it to reveal the document inside. Even from where I stood, I could see the official seal, the signatures, the date. A marriage certificate, with Zachary's name and Marley's name, dated 5 years ago. "No." Emberlyn's voice was barely a whisper. She took a step backward, away from Zachary, away from the little girl clinging to his legs. "No, this can't be." She looked at Zachary, her eyes desperate, pleading for him to say something. Anything. To tell everyone this was a mistake, a lie, a cruel prank. "Cherie," she said, her voice breaking. "Tell them this isn't true. Tell them." Zachary opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. Nothing came out. His face had gone from white to gray. His hands hung at his sides, limp and useless. He looked like a man who'd been caught in a trap with no way out, watching the walls close in around him. The little girl, Mia, looked up at him, confused by his silence. "Daddy, are you okay?" Jason Hartley, standing beside Zachary, as his best man, stepped back as if he'd been burned. "Dude!" he said, his voice sharp with shock and anger. "What the hell is this?" Emberlyn looked from Mia to Marley to the marriage certificate to Zachary. Her eyes were wide, her face pale, her hands shaking so badly her bouquet dropped to the floor, white roses and lilies scattering across the altar steps. "Zachary," she whispered one more time. "Please, tell me this isn't real." But Zachary said nothing, because there was nothing he could say. The evidence was standing right in front of her. A 4-year-old little girl with his blonde curls and his smile calling him daddy. A woman holding a legal marriage certificate with his name on it. The truth had finally, irrevocably come to light. Emberlyn looked at me, then her eyes finding mine across the chaos of the altar. In that moment, I saw her entire world collapsing. Every dream, every hope, every promise she'd believed in, falling apart in front of 200 witnesses. The little girl's voice, "Daddy Sitikama," still echoed through the cathedral, and everyone was watching as the man at the altar said nothing at all. But I wasn't done. The worst part was still ahead. "There's one more thing," I said, my voice cutting through the shocked silence. "One more thing everyone needs to know." Marley had moved closer to the altar, tears streaming down her face. She looked at Emberlyn with an expression of pure misery. "He forced me into this," she said, her voice shaking. "We owe money to dangerous people. He said it was the only way to save our daughter. I didn't want to. I tried to warn you." Emberlyn's face was a mask of shock and betrayal. She looked at Marley, at the marriage certificate still visible in the folder, at little Mia still clinging to Zachary's legs. "So this was all about money." Her voice was hollow. "You were planning to steal from my family." Marley nodded, shame washing over her features. "I'm so sorry." Zachary seemed to realize he needed to regain control of the situation. His face shifted, taking on an expression of desperate sincerity. Okay, yes, I should have been honest from the beginning. He looked at Emberlyn, his voice softening. But I love you, Emberlyn. The money that was just to solve a problem, and then we could have had a real life together. Just you and me. That's a lie, I said coldly. And it's not even the worst lie. Zachary's eyes snapped to me, a flash of warning in them. Mr. Caldwell, I think you've said enough. I haven't said enough, not even close. I pulled out my phone, holding it up, so the guests in the front rows could see the screen. I swiped to the screenshots Martin had shown me this morning, the evidence I'd photographed and sent to the police. This morning, I said, my voice carrying across the stunned cathedral. I discovered something that even Marley didn't know about. I passed the phone to Douglas Whitmore, who was standing in the front pew, his face pale with shock. He looked at the screen, his eyes widening. He passed it to the person next to him, then another. The images began circulating through the front rows, gasps and murmurs following in their wake. Those are emails, I said. Encrypted messages, bank transfers, all from Zachary's laptop. I quoted the key phrases from memory, letting each word hit like a hammer blow. Martin, target 3 months post-wedding. Make it look like an accident. $50,000 on completion. The silence that followed was absolute. Deadly. Zachary wasn't just planning to take our money, I said, looking directly at him. He was planning to make sure I couldn't stop him, permanently. The word hung in the air like poison. He'd already paid someone a deposit, $10,000. The timeline was set, 3 months after the wedding. I turned back to the congregation, many of whom were now staring at their neighbors' phones, looking at the screenshots being passed around. That phone call you got this morning, Zachary, in the car, I heard it. Your contact was confirming the plan. Everything is on track. 3 months, not 1 day sooner. Those were your words. Douglas stood, his face ashen. Pete, are you saying he was planning to... He couldn't finish the sentence, couldn't say the word. Yes, I said. That's exactly what I'm saying. Emberlyn's hand flew to her mouth. She stumbled backward, nearly falling. One of the bridesmaids caught her arm, steadying her. Oh my God, Emberlyn whispered. Oh my God. Dad, he was going to... She looked at me and I saw the moment it all clicked into place. The rushed engagement, the quick wedding, the way Zachary had asked so many questions about my schedule, my routines, my habits. He'd been planning it from the start. You have no proof. Zachary's voice cracked, desperation bleeding through his careful composure. Those could be fake, photoshopped. You're trying to frame me because you never wanted... They're not fake, I said calmly. The police have verified them. They're waiting outside right now. As if on cue, I saw movement near the cathedral entrance. 2 uniformed officers had entered quietly, positioning themselves by the doors. Behind them, I could see more officers outside. Zachary saw them too. His eyes darted from the police to the evidence being passed around the congregation, to Marley standing there with tears on her face, to Mia still holding onto his legs, confused and scared by all the shouting, and then to Emberlyn, standing there in her white wedding dress, looking at him like he was a monster, like he was someone she'd never known at all. I watched the realization hit him. He was trapped, exposed. Every lie he'd told, every plan he'd made, every careful manipulation, all of it was out in the open now. There was no talking his way out of this. No charming smile or smooth explanation that would make any of this go away. He looked at the police officers by the door, at the evidence in people's hands, at me standing in the center aisle, the man who'd destroyed everything he'd worked for. His face went from desperate to panicked, to something cold and calculating, and then he ran. He shoved past Mia, who stumbled and fell with a small cry. He pushed past Reverend Reed, who reached out to stop him, but missed. He vaulted over the altar railing with surprising agility and bolted for the side entrance, the one Martin wasn't guarding. "Stop him!" someone shouted. The police moved, but Zachary had a head start. He crashed through the side door and disappeared into the corridor beyond. The cathedral erupted in chaos. People stood, shouted, pointed. Someone, maybe Jason, tried to go after him, but was held back by an officer. Marley had dropped to her knees, gathering Mia into her arms, both of them crying. And Emberlyn stood frozen at the altar, staring at the spot where Zachary had been standing just seconds ago, where the man she'd been about to marry had been standing, before he'd run like the criminal he was. He didn't make it to the door. The police were already there. Zachary had barely taken 3 steps when 2 uniformed officers emerged from the side corridor, blocking his escape. Their presence was calm, professional, unavoidable. Zachary Palmer. He froze, panic flooding his face. This is a misunderstanding. You're under arrest." The second officer stepped behind him, handcuffs ready. Zachary tried to retreat, but there was nowhere to go. The altar stood behind him. The officers in front. 200 witnesses on every side. Charges include bigamy, fraud, and conspiracy to commit grievous bodily harm, the first officer said, reading his rights in a steady voice. "No, this is insane, I can explain. You'll have the opportunity at the station." The metallic click of the cuffs echoed through the cathedral, impossibly loud in the stunned silence. The officer turned to the congregation. "Anthony Greco has also been apprehended outside. He was attempting to gain entry." Marley, kneeling beside Mia, looked up sharply. "Greco. He's in custody, ma'am. You're safe." Relief crashed over Marley so intensely, it looked like pain. She sank onto a pew, pulling Mia into her arms, sobbing not in grief, but release. The officers led Zachary toward the exit. His movements were stiff, the handcuffs forcing his shoulders back, his tuxedo suddenly looking like a cheap costume. At the aisle, he turned, eyes locking on Emberlyn at the altar. "Emberlyn, please, don't." Her voice was flat, final. Tears streamed down her face, but her expression was stone. "Don't say my name." He faltered, then allowed himself to be led away. The cathedral doors opened to flashing lights outside, then closed with a hollow boom that felt like an ending. Silence swallowed the sanctuary. Then Emberlyn's knees gave way. I moved instantly. Martin was there too. Together we caught her and lowered her to the altar steps. She didn't resist, just stared ahead, her wedding dress pooled around her like something broken. Marley rose slowly and approached, hesitant. "Miss Caldwell, there's something you need to know." Emberlyn looked up, eyes swollen. "Haven't you said enough? I tried to warn you." The words lingered. 3 weeks ago, I sent an anonymous letter to your office. I told you Zachary wasn't who he claimed to be." Emberlyn blinked. "There was a letter. I thought it was a prank. 2 weeks ago I called you. I reached your assistant. But Zachary came home early. He heard me. He took the phone." Emberlyn's breath caught. "That call. I heard someone say my name. Then it cut off. He threatened to take Mia if I tried again," Marley said, voice breaking. "Said I'd never see her again." Understanding spread across Emberlyn's face. "You were trying to save me." Marley nodded. "I was terrified, but I couldn't stay silent. I'm sorry." The warnings, Emberlyn whispered, turning to me. "They were real. You couldn't have known," I said softly. She looked around the cathedral at the flowers, the silent guests, the photographer frozen in place. At Mia quietly playing in the corner. Her wedding, gone. But she was alive. Safe. She turned back to me. "You saved me. Even if I hate you for a while. I'll accept that," I said. "As long as you're safe." "I thought I loved him," she whispered, then broke. I held her as she sobbed, just like when she was little. Around us, the cathedral emptied. Douglas passed with a grave nod. Marley gathered Mia and left with an officer, pausing once to look back at Emberlyn with regret and hope. Martin stood guard nearby. At last it was just us. "What happens now?" Emberlyn asked. "We go home," I said. and you heal." She nodded and leaned into me. Justice had been served, and my daughter finally understood why. 6 months later, I sat in my home office as afternoon light filtered through the windows. On my desk was a photograph of Ember Lynn taken just last week. She was smiling, not the same carefree smile she'd had before that November morning, but a real one that reached her eyes. I leaned back and thought about everything that had happened since the day at St. Benedict's Cathedral. Zachary Palmer had been sentenced to 25 years in prison, 5 for bigamy, 10 for fraud, and 15 for conspiracy to commit grievous harm. The sentences ran concurrently, but even with good behavior, he wouldn't see freedom for decades. Anthony Greco had been arrested outside the cathedral that same morning. The charges against him were extensive racketeering, extortion, loan sharking, and conspiracy to commit murder. He received 30 years. Authorities had been building a case against him for months, and our evidence finished it. Marley Palmer was granted immunity on most charges in exchange for her testimony. She received probation and a suspended sentence. The judge acknowledged she'd been coerced by threats against her daughter. She had tried to warn Ember Lynn. She'd done what she could. I paid off Mia's medical debt, all $95,000. I helped Marley relocate outside the city and set up a trust fund for Mia's education and health care. Caroline would have done the same. That little girl was innocent. Marley cried when I told her. She'd expected judgment, not mercy. The first month after the wedding was the hardest. Ember Lynn barely spoke to me. She was angry at Zachary, at the world, and at me for destroying her wedding day. She couldn't understand why I hadn't told her privately. I let her be angry. By the second month, she began therapy with a trauma specialist. Slowly, she processed the truth. By the third month, she understood why I'd done what I did. If I'd warned her quietly, she might not have believed me. Now, 6 months later, she was stronger, wiser, not broken. There was a knock on my door. "Come in," I said. Ember Lynn stepped inside, wearing jeans and a sweater, her hair in a ponytail. She looked healthy. She looked like herself. "Hey, Dad. I'm always happy to see you. How was your day?" She sat across from me. "I met Marley and Mia for coffee. I was surprised." "You did?" "Yeah. Mia's doing really well. She still talks about the pretty church sometimes. Marley started a new job. She's trying." We sat quietly for a moment. "I need to say something," Ember Lynn said. "Okay. Thank you for saving me. Even though I hated you at first, you had every right to. I was angry because you were right," she said softly. "And I didn't want to admit I'd been so blind." "You weren't blind. You were in love." Her eyes filled with tears. "I keep thinking about Mom. She'd be proud of you." Ember Lynn smiled faintly. "I'm learning how to trust again. Slowly. Take all the time you need. I'm thinking about going back to school," she said. "Psychology. To help people like me. You'd be wonderful at that." We talked a little longer about the future. Then Martin appeared at the door. "Oh, I didn't realize Miss Ember Lynn was here." Ember Lynn hugged him. "Thank you." After she left, I looked at Caroline's photograph on the shelf. "We did it," I whispered. "She's going to be okay." Outside, city lights began to glow. Life wasn't perfect, but it was honest, and that was enough. And to you listening to this family story, remember, this God gives us instincts for a reason. When I first felt something was wrong with Zachary, I believe God was whispering to my heart. I ignored it because I wanted Ember Lynn to be happy. But God doesn't whisper warnings so we can ignore them. He whispers so we can protect the ones we love. Trust those instincts. They might just save a life. Looking back on this family story, I see my mistakes clearly. I waited too long. I let fear of hurting my daughter stop me from protecting her. Don't be like me. Don't wait until the wedding day to act. If you see red flags, address them early. Have the hard conversations. Yes, your loved ones might be angry at first. Yes, they might push you away. But anger fades. Death doesn't. Betrayal leaves scars that take years to heal. Act early even when it's uncomfortable. Here's what I learned about dad revenge, and I want to be clear, this wasn't about revenge. This was about protection. Real dad revenge isn't about destroying someone out of spite. It's about standing between your child and danger, no matter the cost. It's about being willing to be the villain in their story for a season so they can have a future. That's what dad revenge really means, sacrificing your comfort, your reputation, even your relationship temporarily to keep them safe. God gave me a second chance when Martin came to me with the truth. Not everyone gets that. I thank God every day that I listened. I thank God that Emberlyn is alive and healing. And I thank God for people like Martin, who had the courage to do what was right, even when it was hard. If this family story resonated with you, I'd be grateful if you'd subscribe to this channel for more true stories like this one. Leave a comment below telling me what you would have done in my situation. I read every single one. Share this story with someone who needs to hear it. Your share might save someone's life. Thank you for staying with me until the very end. I know this wasn't an easy story to hear, and I want to be honest with you, some of the stories that follow contain fictionalized elements created for educational purposes. If that's not something you're comfortable with, feel free to explore other content that suits you better. But if you're willing to learn from real experiences, even painful ones, I'll be here sharing what I've learned. God bless you. And remember, protecting your family is never wrong.